if there's anything that you don't want to talk about, we would love to know so we don't talk about it. And it's not live, so if you
I don't
want
want to talk about Bruno.
to. My wife loves that movie.
Yep.
He rarely comes up.
Yeah, I figured.
Welcome to Dead Headspace. I am your host, Patrick R. McDonough, joined always by my co-host, Brennan LaFaro. Say hi, Brennan.
Hello, everybody.
And today we are here to talk with the author, Lucy A. Snyder. Say hi, Lucy.
Hey, everybody.
Let's just jump to the base question. What got you into horror?
The thing that got me into horror, honestly, is the reason I haven't slept well in the past 3 nights, which is nightmares. Yay! Honestly, when I was a kid, I read science fiction and fantasy. And so initially I started trying to write science fiction and fantasy, but the stories always turned really dark and strange. And people were like, this is not science fiction. This is something different. And finally I came to grips with what was wanting to come out of my head was horror. And so once I got to be in my 20s, I sat down and started really reading horror and getting into it and, kind of dedicating myself to the genre that seems to have chosen me rather than me choosing it.
In your early 20s, who were some of the authors that really influenced you and helped you decide that was the genre for you?
Honestly, Clive Barker was one of the early ones that really captured my attention. And part of that, honestly, is because a lot of his stuff does have a strong fantasy element to it. Mm-hmm. Another thing that was really influential to me that's, not a novel per se, but a Neil Gaiman Sandman comic series was really, really cool.
Yeah, definitely. One of my personal favorites of his works is Ocean at the End of the Lane. That's something that Brennan actually turned me on to. That's like a lot of his work, super fantastical. And I don't know if either one of you have heard of this, but the first movie I saw that he wrote was Mirror Mask, and that was
I love that movie. That's so cool.
It's super cool. And for those listening that may not be aware, it's basically like a modern day Wizard of Oz, but it's with a girl and her parents have a circus. So I'll leave it there. Brennan, do you want to jump into the next question, sir?
Do you have something in mind, or
I was hoping we could, to me? Well, I was hoping that we could go with Erica's questions. She wanted to be here, but she had something come up. Erica Robin, she is our most frequented guest host. She wanted to let you know, Lucy, that she's really sorry that I'm putting words in her mouth. I don't know what she said, but paraphrasing, she's sorry that she can't be here. I don't know how else to phrase it, so I'm just going to say that. Sorry, Erica.
Stuff happens.
Yep. So Erica wanted to ask about a book that all three of us really, really enjoyed, and that's Halloween Season. It was out October 2020 from Raw Dog Screaming Press, and it's a collection of Halloween-themed short stories. Erica says, selfishly, because I'm obsessed with holiday horror, I have to ask, do you have any plans for other holiday-themed collections one day?
Not a collection quite yet. I mean, it takes me a while to get the stories put together. I do have an idea for a Christmas-themed horror novel, though. That I have not started writing, but a couple of people who I talked to about it seem pretty enthusiastic about it. So hopefully I'll have time to get into that before too much longer. But yeah, I mean, writing to a holiday theme was really fun. So I would certainly be willing to do that again for a short story collection.
That'd be really cool.
What I love about the Halloween theme too is that, well, I mean, it's just the genre we're in. Any horror lover worth their salt they're not just gonna break this collection out in October. They're gonna read it all year round. I don't know if that's always gonna be true for, if you write a collection of Easter stories, that might be, more April and May specific. But with Halloween Season, I remember reading it and just having that, this is such a fun, like, crunchy leaves on the ground book to be reading, but at the same time, I could pick this up in July and I'd be perfectly happy with that.
Cool.
I love the cover. Wasn't that Lynn Hanson?
Yeah.
Oh my God, her name slipped my mind. Lynn Hanson.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it was. Yeah, she did a really great job. I love what she did with the cover.
Is there, I'm listening to other podcasts and they sometimes, like Larry Barron and Philip Fracassi on Philip's show, they broke down kind of the process with how they pick the order in a collection. Is there any, like, I've heard a lot of authors focus on first and last story. Is there any kind of, I'll say ritual, that's not the right word, any kind of practice, I guess, where you take when going through the order of your collections?
Yeah, absolutely. I always try to look for a good flow if possible. With this collection, I kind of deliberately took kind of a candy theme in a couple of different directions. But one is sort of like, when you bite into a chocolate ganache where there's this bit of dark chocolate, like right in the middle, like the stories get progressively darker to the middle until we get to The Kind Detective, which is right smack in the middle and is probably the grimmest story in here. And then things get weird. And then, we end up with a couple of, pretty light, funny stories at the very end. So I was looking for that kind of flow where we, start out solidly, in the holiday mode, things get dark, things get weird, and then things get fun.
I love that. I love that so much. Brennan, I want to ask what I know it's been like a while, but do you have a favorite story if you were to suggest one to the readers?
From Halloween season, that is?
Yeah.
I remember really enjoying, I think it was Cosmic, Lucy, you'll have to forgive me and then you'll have to correct me. I think it was Cosmic Cola.
Yeah.
Is the one with almost a little bit of Lovecraft to it. And does that take place at a candy factory, or am I completely fabricating it at this point?
It doesn't take place at a candy factory. It's basically in this little town that's very similar to Innsmouth, where basically they've got two things going on. They've got fishing, and then they've got this Cosmic Cola plant. They export all this soda that the main character hates. And they've moved to town because their stepfather just got this high-level executive job at the company. And then we, of course, discover a Lovecraftian, conspiracies afoot, human sacrifice, that type thing. But yeah, it's the cola company rather than candy.
I got it says Cosmic Cola right in the title. Why am I thinking candy? But
it's fine. I mean, people do eat a lot of candy in the story, but
Yeah, I remember just it's dark fun, and that's exactly if I'm picking up like a Halloween collection, that's what I want. Like Halloween, of course. I mean, it's the spooky season. It's the holiday for horror, but at the same time, there should be an element of fun to it, and I feel like Cosmic Cola definitely captures that vibe, that atmosphere.
Cool. I was hoping to capture that with that particular story.
I don't know if anyone else has said this, but Halloween 3 reminded me a lot about Halloween 3, Cosmic Cola, just like because of the town and the factory setting. It had similarities. It's creepy but kind of fun at the same time.
Okay, I actually haven't seen Halloween 3, so I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, it's just has nothing to do with Michael Myers, but it's
just the setting.
Yeah.
Brennan, any more questions from Erica?
Yeah, let me pull that last one up. Hold on. Erica also says, have you ever considered returning to a short story to create a novella or novel? Specifically, when I read Visions of the Dream Witch in Halloween season, I absolutely loved the tale. And while thinking the short was perfect as is, I also craved more from these characters. So I'd actually love, if you have any comments on that story, I'd love to hear them. But also, I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about and this ties into another question we have later on, maybe revisiting an idea you have in one form to take it to a different form, a longer or even a shorter form.
Yeah, absolutely. I've done that a lot. All of the novels I've written to date have begun with short stories, honestly. The novel that I have coming out from Nightfire next February, I believe it is, started with my story Magdala, which came out a while back and won the Stoker Award. And there have been a couple of stories that people have, said, hey, this was really cool. Are you going to write more with this? Magdala, of all the stories I had, was the one where I was thinking, you know what? I have no idea what I can do with this, because like the world is ending at the end of this story. What else is there to write? But then when other people were, namely the people from Nightfire, were like, hey, we would really like to see a novel from this. I'm like, okay. And then I figured it out. And I'm actually pretty happy with what I came up with. But yeah, definitely. I've heard other people talking about Visions of the Dream Witch. It's definitely set in a world where there could be a lot more. And, it's just a matter of figuring out, who would be interested and when could I do it and stuff like that.
I would imagine that, you're a Stoker winning writer. You've got, as you mentioned, a novel coming out with Tor Nightfire, which is no small feat. I mean, at that point, you do kind of have to select your projects. I would absolutely love to work with Tor Nightfire someday, but at the same time, because I'm not there yet, I can, if I want to write a novella, I'm going to write that because I got time for it, and nobody breathing down my neck for deadlines. So how do you kind of balance that? Balance picking your projects.
For me, it's a matter of both time and energy management. When I was starting out, it was much more of a time management problem. I, at this point, am writing full time, which is really cool, but also, kind of scary because, the income is wildly unpredictable at this point. But yeah, so I have to kind of be a little bit more selective about what I'm doing now, just because, I do have to live on the income that I'm bringing in. So if I've got, one publisher, is looking to pay me, professional advance for a novel, obviously I need to take that much more seriously than if there's like a fun little anthology project that comes along that I might really love to write something for, but they're only paying 3 cents a word. I can't go to my agent and say, yeah, the book's late because I was writing for, Vampires Don't Sparkle Part 2. She'll be like, come over here so I can slap you, I mean, not really. She's not a violent person.
Shots fired, Twilight.
But I mean, the implication will be there that I have to be, I guess, more responsible now that I have a career. Oh my God,
That's awesome though. Like seriously,
yeah.
Congrats. What is besides the influx of income? What I'm not looking for like super detailed unless you wanna examples, but as far as like healthcare and all that stuff goes, that's gonna be running through the equation too. Like, what do you do in a scenario like that?
Honestly, I've had pretty good luck with ACA with the marketplace. I know that once that's been very expensive for some people, but for where I'm at and what I need, I've been able to make that work for me. If my situation changes, I might have to do something else. But that's one aspect that's actually gone a lot more smoothly than I thought it was gonna. So yeah. I mean, luckily I don't have kids. If I had kids, it would be a whole different ball game, stuff like that.
Isn't it like it? Well, I know it is for me, but I don't know how it is state by state. It's like exponentially more expensive when you have kids.
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Like a stupid amount that I can't do the math where it makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me in particular, it's a good deal, but for lots of other folks, it really isn't. So, it's one of those your mileage may wildly vary type things.
Oh, that's fair. Brennan, I actually want to ask the other 2 questions so then we can dive into what we have in store. So sure. The first one is, and I apologize if I'm not pronouncing this name correctly, but from Slava Vensky. They ask,
I think.
okay, thanks. What does your writing process look like?
Well, there's a lot of panicking and a lot of crying. No, I'm kidding. What I typically do is I think about a project for quite a while before I actually start to write. My preferred method is to binge write, to, have multiple unbroken hours where I can just sit down and kind of get in the groove and get a lot of words written all at once. I know people who can sit down at their computers before they go to work for 15 minutes, and they're very productive that way. I have no idea how they do that, because 15 minutes would be just long enough for me to really get my thoughts gathered. Then I would have to get up and leave. I would not be able to work that way. So yeah, I'm definitely a binge writer. I don't necessarily write every day, but I'm at least thinking about the narrative every day. And I kind of look for ways of giving myself the stretches of time that I need to really be productive.
Yeah, I can appreciate that. I love the idea of a lot of writers will write in sprints, 15 minutes here, 15 minutes there. I watched an interview recently with Don Winslow and David Baldacci were being interviewed by Jake Tapper. And I did not realize that Jake Tapper, in addition to working for CNN, is also writes fiction. And he said that with his hectic schedule, he puts aside 15 minutes a morning to write. And I can't imagine being productive in that time. I feel like, I'd get started, I'd sit down, I'd put my hands on the keyboard, and 5 minutes have passed. And then I'm panicking, I'm spending the next 5 minutes panicking that 5 minutes have passed. And I think that must be a really nice kind of benefit of being able to write full time, is being able to set aside that chunk of time specifically to get this done on your terms, I guess I would say.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm not taking for granted the luxury that I have to be able to set my own schedule now. That part is really great. It's just, like I said, it's just a matter of energy management as well, because, I've got other stuff I need to do, and sometimes I don't sleep well. And, if it's a day where I didn't get any sleep, or a day after a night where I didn't get any sleep, I might have the best intentions of the world, but my brain is just not firing on all cylinders. And, what I'm writing is kind of like, at the end of the day, I'm like, you know what, we might as well have not tried this today. Because I really hate having to scrap work and start over. I'm much more of a measure 3 times, cut once kind of writer. I'll tend to write much more slowly than some people. But I usually, knock on wood, I don't have to scrap a lot. I don't have to do a whole bunch of architectural rewriting later on. It's mostly, filling things out, fixing, turns of phrase, things like that.
That's pretty cool. Do you normally write at a certain time? Because I know, like Lansdale, he says that he gets up at 5, 4 sometimes to write, and then there's other, writers that really like to do it at night. So I was wondering if you have kind of a certain time that you feel flow going out better than other times of the day.
Historically, things have gone a lot better writing late at night. But my housemates don't really love that because it makes their scheduling, kind of difficult if, they're trying to get work done. And I'm like, would you please stop banging pots in the kitchen? I'm trying to sleep, that kind of thing. So they would be much happier if I were on the same schedule they were, but that doesn't always work. Sometimes 3 a.m. is when the magic happens, and I can't really explain why.
Oh my God. So early.
But if you don't have to get up and go to a job the next day, it's not so bad.
That's true. Because I'm thinking I get up at 5 before it's an hour before I got to go to work. So yeah, that's a really good point, Brennan. Oh man. Okay, so the second name, apologies again. Arecibo Campeche.
Yeah.
And I see a picture. So he asks, how do you, or I'm assuming, so he asks, how do you decide if an idea will become a poem, short story, or a book? He followed that up with the one more question. What would it take for you to change from one to another midway through writing, if this happens at all? So I'll ask the first question again, because that was a mouthful. How do you decide if an idea will become a poem, short story, or a book?
Well, a lot of times I'm writing to fulfill an invitation. I've been invited to write for an anthology. I've been invited to write to submit a poem. There's a specific type of work that I need to submit. So I have learned over the years, and I can't necessarily articulate how this works, but I've learned kind of been able to internalize what will be a good story idea versus a novel idea versus a poem idea. I've learned to pretty well judge how long a particular narrative is going to take to spin out. Cosmic Cola actually surprised me. I originally had planned for that to be like 6,000 words long, and it actually came out close to 10. But luckily, the editor was not upset that I wildly blew past the requested word count, because he'd had somebody kind of drop out at the last minute, so he had the space for it, and so that worked out really well. But I try not to do that. I try to hit my target within 10% either direction, and people are usually happy with that. This is a learnable skill. I have no idea how to teach somebody how to do it. But I think a lot of it has to do with reading a lot of work in the links that you're trying to write, because it kind of imprints those structures into your brain and those types of pacings into your brain. And I think that helps a great deal. So to answer his question, part of it is, my invitations dictate what it is that I'm writing and how long it is. Sometimes if I'm just writing on spec, I might play around with something. I've certainly started poems that weren't going right. Like I couldn't get I couldn't get the rhythm right. I couldn't get the line lengths to work out properly. It just wasn't working as a poem. I tend to write narrative poems. And so sometimes I've taken one of those poems that isn't quite going the way I think it ought to, and I take it out of stanzas and see if it works as a flash piece. And 9 times out of 10, I can make it into a viable flash piece if I can't make it work as a poem. And so there are a couple of pieces that I do have a poem version and I have a flash fiction version. And like I said earlier, I've taken some short stories and expanded them into novels. So I kind of go back and forth with things. Some novels I've gone through and looked for self-contained sections that I could then turn into a short story. So it does go back and forth.
That's really cool. Oh, I love that. Yeah. You know what? That maybe it's just my weird brain thinking this, but like, I was listening to Philip Fracasse's podcast and he had Ellen Datlow on, and she was talking about how, and I've heard this from authors before, that you shouldn't throw away any of your work because you could cannibalize those stories. Take the best parts and just put it to what it applies to. So that's how I took what you said in that very last part. Yeah. So with me, just to piggyback off of Lucy, sometimes I have an idea and I go, that probably be a short story, and then it blows up. Does that happen to you, Brennan?
I mean, occasionally. I feel like I usually try to know what I'm going to write before I start writing it, and it either works or it doesn't, and it goes in the death folder. But honestly, I know a lot of people are pretty good about repurposing and looking at a story and saying, oh, I thought this was going to be 5,000 words, but it's 20. And I don't find that happens, but I have to say, I really appreciate Lucy kind of taking a swing at how to understand. We've had this conversation a fair few times in 150 episodes, and the most common answer does seem to be, I don't know how I know it's going to be the length it's going to be. I just do. I'm so sorry. I can't provide a better answer. And I really think that it boils down to the longer you write, the more you kind of practice the skill. And also, Lucy, you said reading is certainly a big helper. It just becomes kind of a natural innate skill. But again, I do appreciate you taking a swing at here's why I think that, writers who are seasoned can pull it off.
It's certainly a matter of practice. But the reason I think it's also a matter of reading is when I was a very young writer, there were a lot more opportunities to write short stories than obviously, novels. So I was starting to write short stories, and they were always blowing up on me and getting long and things like that. But the thing was, I was only reading novels. I wasn't reading a lot of short fiction outside of whatever got assigned in English classes. And I realized, oh yeah, maybe if I want to write these, I should really be reading these. And so once I started regularly reading short fiction, things got a lot better. I mean, it really did help me. But of course, at the same time, in tandem with that, I was getting more practice writing. So, I think they both matter a lot, both the practice and the reading. But, I think if somebody just keeps trying, they'll eventually get there. They'll eventually figure it out on their own.
No, just I'm going to throw this out there, but if there's somebody listening who, because I think that's great advice, like whatever you're trying to improve at, you need to read that. I just, I've talked ad nauseum on this show about the importance of reading in order to learn how to write. I just don't think it can be understated. If there's somebody who likes that piece of advice and wants to learn how to write better short fiction, besides yourself, who do you think are some modern writers that they should check out that really have a good hold on that style?
A good question.
Oh gosh, you were going to ask me that question.
I mean, that's not a good question.
There are so many people. There are so many people who are really good short story writers. I mean,
only name the people you like.
I'm
just joking.
Yeah, put me on the spot, man. What I would advise people to do, because I've had very good luck with this, is go look at the awards long list for every year. There's the Shirley Jackson Awards, there's the World Fantasy Awards, there's the Bram Stoker Awards. Look at the short stories and novellas that end up on their long list, the things that have been nominated, and start reading those. There's a lot of really good stuff that's freely available on the web. Like if you read the stories at Nightmare Magazine, those are going to be top drawer. Apex Magazine, that's another good place to find stuff. There are a bunch of, and Tor.com has got a lot of good stuff as well. It'll be, kind of across the board genre wise, but yeah, in terms of individual people, I mean, there's like Ursula Vernon, Shannon McGuire is really great. She has co-written a series of Lovecraftian space operas that I love to death. It's in her Boojumverse. Since we were talking about Lovecraft earlier, like if you enjoy that and want to see it set in outer space, that would be, totally somebody's jam. We were talking about Neil Gaiman. I mean, he's a brilliant short story writer. There's just a whole bunch of people out there. There's a lot of people who are writing really good stuff right now.
Let's put Brennan on the spot. Who would you pick?
I'll go there in a minute, but actually, I really like how you started with markets as opposed to just you named some individuals, so technically you didn't dodge the question. But I would add, like, if you are learning to write short stories and you're submitting them and you keep getting rejected, read from that market.
Absolutely, yeah.
Like you mentioned Nightmare. They take the top of the line, so read their stuff in order to both understand what those editors consider top of the line, but also to understand to a degree, how you might need to approach your storytelling different in order to kind of crack that market. Short stories.
I was only kidding, Brian. I was just trying to be a smart ass.
Good, because I don't want to answer.
I wouldn't want to answer that either. There's so many, and then when you're asked questions, your mind just goes blank.
Oh, it absolutely does.
So his second question was, what would it take for you to change from one to another midway through, being a poem or short story book, through writing, if this happens at all?
Like I said, sometimes if I'm writing poetry, and typically if I'm writing poetry, it's because I wanted to rather than because somebody invited me to. I do get invited to write poetry for various projects, but it happens much less often than with short fiction. So like I'll be writing a poem, like say for my Patreon or something, and that can be anything that I want it to be, right? But if I'm working with it and it's just not coming together, like I said, I'll sometimes take it out of stanzas and see if it works as a flash piece, or if it works as the start of a flash piece. Poem can often get by on simply being evocative and thought-provoking, whereas, flash piece really does need to have, a plot to it, some kind of narrative, some kind of twist at least. So sometimes I'll need to add a bit more. But if I've been invited to write a thing for a particular project and the editor's expecting it, it kind of needs to be that, it needs to stay that. Sometimes I will abandon something that I realize is going to get out of control and not even going to come close to the word counts they requested, but I'll keep it. I won't just delete it, but then I'll move on to something else. I've had to do that a couple of times.
Interesting. Brennan, take us away with any direction you want, and then I'll jump back.
Sure. So, Lucy, you mentioned earlier that you have a novel coming out from Tor next February monster.
Yep.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounded like they commissioned it.
Well, I had run a couple of ideas past both my agent, first my agent, and they were like, we like these ideas. And then once I worked up those ideas, she pitched them to my editor at Tor, and she was like, "Ooh, I really like this one." And I, part of me was going, "Oh, son of a bitch," because this was the one where, again, I was not super duper clear on how I was going to expand that world, but everybody had been asking for it, right? And so I thought, okay, I got to pull up my socks and figure this one out. And I'm pretty happy with how it's come out. Like initially, it was kind of funny. Initially, I was like, oh, how am I ever going to get this even to 60,000 words? And then in my most recent pass, I'm like, oh my God, how am I going to keep it under 80? Once it started taking off, it really took off. So
that's cool. So can you give us kind of a base synopsis on what people can expect?
Okay, if you've read Magdala Amygdala, the book is broken into 3 parts. The first part deals with Erin, who is the protagonist of Magdala Amygdala. We find out a whole bunch more about where she, her life before the infection. We learn more about her relationship with Betty and where that came from. The second part deals with a character named Savannah. And that actually is based on a short story that was in the Miscreations anthology that came out a few years back. Mm-hmm. I'd written it kind of in the same world. And that part is a significant expansion of that character story. And then part 3 is about a woman named Mareva, and it kind of binds the first 2 stories to the first 2 narratives together. And then we kind of find out what happens after Erin's transformation and a whole bunch of other things.
That's excellent. And what an exciting press to be working with. I believe they started putting out books under the Nightfire label just mid to late last year.
Yeah, it's been pretty recent.
Yeah, and they're putting out some very. I mean, every title they drop from Katrina Ward is just it's excellent. Gretchen Felker Martin's Manhunt, got a lot of attention. It's just
yeah,
it's a very exciting press to be working with. So I mean, big congratulations to you for landing that.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm excited to see what happens. I suspect I'm not going to be like lambasted in the British press like Gretchen was.
Probably not.
That whole thing was crazy, but the book has been selling like mad, so good for her.
That Harry Potter lady had it coming.
She only had herself to blame.
Yeah.
Sorry, I've got Cell Block Tango echoing through my mind right now. Anyway, yeah, I've really been happy working with Tor Nightfire. I've worked in various capacities with other very large publishers, and they have by far been the most engaged one. Working with I worked with Random House for my first 3 novels, and I mean, they were fine, they were professional, but at no point was I not aware that I was a tiny cog in a vast publishing machine. And even now, like if I need to get a hold of somebody, I mean, good luck with that. All the communications I get from them are extremely anonymous. Nobody's name is attached to anything. I don't know who I'm talking to. It's kind of frustrating.
That's weird.
But like, weird. Yeah, you would hope things would be different. But with Tor Nightfire, like I have a team. I know who's on my team. They talk to me and stuff. It's cool.
So I'm very interested in that, the fact that this big major league press, is garnering a reputation for really almost the personal touch. So I wonder if can you tell us like a little bit about how that team operates?
To a certain extent, I can't speak to that a whole lot because I'm still pretty early on in the production process. Right now they've started promoting the book, even though like the finalized copy hasn't gotten into production yet. We are about to enter the copy editing phase, and there are some things I wanted to add to the book and all that. So we're not even at a point where the book is finished. I don't quite know how long it's going to be, things like that. And one thing, this is just an aside, I was over on Goodreads and I noticed somebody had rated the book 4 stars, and I'm like, are you in my brain? Like, how do you know what the book is? I don't even know what the book is yet. Come on.
Welcome to Tor Nightfire, where you get Goodreads ratings before the book, or anybody but you has read it.
But yeah, so anyway, I've gotten, even at this point, I've gotten communications from some people in their promotions side of things. They've been like sending me graphics for one thing and another for social media. I've gotten information about one thing or another that's been coming up. They've been trying to loop me in on stuff so that at least I know what's going to be happening when, that type of thing. So they do like to get a nice long lead time on things, which is very, very different than working with a small press, because, with a small press, it's like you can get a book to them, 4 months before the pub date, and it's fine. And review copies basically go out pretty adjacent to when the book is being published. But here it's like they want to get review copies into reviewers' hands like 6 months before the book comes out at least. So it's a very different kind of deal.
Sorry to harp on this, but I've talked about in previous episodes how horror fans, readers, whatever, our writers, we like to be, we want to be killed and mutilated. And that just goes to show you, if you're not a horror fan, you're probably going to take offense to it. I do think that's funny. And I have a kind of a smart ass question. Is that considered fan fiction in the Harry Potter world? Like in the Dark Tower series, how Stephen King's in his own series.
Yeah.
Would it be fitting? It'd be fitting if Gretchen was like the creator of that. I am very curious to hear about. I don't know. I'm really bad with pronouncing things tonight. Is it Cheryl Mad? Your anthology that you co-edited?
Carol Mad, yeah.
Yeah. I'd love to know your process with co-editing an anthology with someone.
That worked out really well. Michael Bailey, I've known him for quite a while. I'd known him before, we ended up co-editing together. I'd written some stories for him when he was editing anthologies. And, he put out the call saying, hey, I'm putting together this anthology where the whole theme is collaboration. So I want to collaborate with another editor. And so I threw my hat in the ring and he was like, yeah, this will work out. So it was sort of a combination of invitations and people that Michael and I specifically said, hey, why don't y'all team up and write us a short story? And then we also had an open call for submissions. And once the dust had settled on that, we kind of looked at what we had and, we made a few more invitations because, we wanted to shape the book in a certain direction and add a little bit more balance and things like that. So we ended up inviting people to write, and the vast majority of them were able to do so, after we'd already gone through the slush pile. The interesting thing about the slush pile was, and nobody who's actually edited an anthology will be surprised by this, like 53% of what was submitted to us was an auto reject because it was written by one person. Like, the whole, the central requirement, right up front in our guidelines was it had to be co-written by at least two people. It could be more than two, but it couldn't just be one. And I figured, we would have the problem of people pretending that they had co-written a story with like their cat or something or their dog. But nobody did that. People just sent us solo written stories. And it was like, did you even look at the guidelines?
And the answer is no, they did not.
and yeah, no, they did not. So that kind of made our jobs easier. We were just like, okay, well, we can't use this one. It doesn't fit, the guidelines. So those would just get, form rejections. And of the ones that came after that, I mean, we gave stories a fair shot and read, but like you could honestly tell from the first page whether or not it was something that was going to be usable. Like a lot of people just had seemingly not even heard of standard manuscript format. And the people who had not heard of that had also not heard of proofreading and a bunch of other things. So, it was, the slush pile was actually easier to manage than I suspected it might be. Because previously I had worked on a small webzine years back, and I knew that the moment you offer money for anything, you just get inundated with submissions. But we really kind of didn't. I think part of it was that we only had the doors open for a very limited period of time.
How long?
And I can't even remember at this point, but it was like just like a month or two or something. And I mean, people we'd invited, we worked with them, if they couldn't get anything to us like right then, we would, give them whatever time they needed within reason. But yeah, so it was just a lot of people just weeded themselves out of the running like really fast. And then we only really had to seriously consider about 25% of what we got. And there were only a couple of things that I was kind of like, gosh, this really could have been a good story if only, and we did send a little feedback to folks, but you never know how that's going to be received.
Yeah, I just took on my first editorial debut with an anthology, and yeah, I can. It's a Wild West, based in the Old West, and it puzzled me how many people wrote it about things that weren't in the West or in the future. It just it's like, that's the whole main theme there. We're just going off base. Yeah. I was curious because I kind of developed. I asked a few editors that I looked up to. Like I asked Alan Datlow and Lansdale what their process was like. I'm like, do I read a paragraph, a page? If I don't like it, I know that you can tell really quick. They pretty much a paragraph to a page. It's pretty good. You can tell pretty much the whole story within that range, and it worked. I was wondering if you did just the one page, or in some cases if you pushed through and it paid off, or if you kind of just stuck to one thing.
Usually you can tell, usually like 90% of the time you can tell within one page. Occasionally I could tell within one paragraph. But I would give it a page just to make sure. But nothing that was going to require a lot of remedial developmental editing was going to make the cut anyway. So ultimately the folks that, had this was the beginnings of a really good story, but it needs more work. They got some level of feedback from Michael. He mostly handled that, but yeah, it's like you can tell within the first page if somebody really knows what they're doing. The like very professional stories, immediately pop out at you. And of course I would continue reading those until I hit a problem. And then I would read past the problem and, kind of see where it went. But yeah, a first page, I usually give it more than a first paragraph, unless it's just, awful, like you're reading something and you're like, okay, this is not going to work, I
totally get it. Yeah, Brennan, go ahead, bud.
First off, Lucy, I just wanted to congratulate you. Your book, Exposed Nerves, just got nominated for a 2022 Elgin Award, correct?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it had also been nominated for Stoker previous to that.
Oh, excellent. I missed that. So I want to talk just a little bit about poetry. It's something that we have not really covered a lot on this show. And I'm wondering, what is your approach to writing poetry versus straight prose? I was very interested to hear you talking about taking a poem and restructuring it to become flash fiction, but how different is poetry from prose for you?
Poetry is pretty different from like regular short stories, but I would say that poems and flash fiction have a whole lot in common. I would strongly advise anybody who wants to write flash fiction to study poetry, read poetry, try your hand at poetry, even if you never feel like your poetry is really that good or something that you can get published. It will certainly improve your fiction. So it's sort of like cross training, football players taking ballet and that type of thing. Poetry is cool to me in that I get into a zone when I'm writing it that I don't get into when I'm just writing prose. Like it fits into interesting places in my brain, and that's why I really enjoy both reading it and writing it. It does something for me that fiction does not. Obviously it's not a completely different thing. We're all using the same words and things like that, but writing poetry really teaches you how to economically describe things, how to create eyeball kicks, those really vivid, interesting turns of phrase and descriptions and things like that. It teaches you rhythm, how language flows together. It teaches you how you can layer in meanings, how, thinking about how a word could mean more than one thing, depending on the context in which you read it. So it's just, I think it does really cool things for a writer's brain. So I encourage everybody to at least try it. It might not be your thing, but I think you'll get a lot out of it.
I also heard someone, I forget who, but they mentioned that reading poetry will teach you. Oh, I think it was Victor Laval. I feel like it was him that said this. He said that reading poetry will teach you where to have page breaks, where to separate one thought from another. And I never thought of that before.
Absolutely.
Brennan, you want to lead the way with the next question?
Oh yeah, sure. Lucy, what are you currently reading or have read recently that you'd like to give a shout out to?
We already talked about it a little while ago, but I read Manhunt a while back and kind of reread it. That was really cool. I read T. Kingfisher's What Moves the Dead fairly recently. That isn't out yet. But that is a neat little novella. It's a reimagining of The Fall of the House of Usher. And it's just very cool. Let's see. I have downloaded a whole bunch of books recently. My TBR pile is all on my iPad, which I don't have in front of me, but it was just sort of like, oh, there's a bunch of cool stuff on sale. Let me grab that.
Yeah, so many books that, man, how would any of us read even half of them in one lifetime? But that's kind of the beautiful
It's not
thing.
happening.
No. Brendan, what are you currently reading?
Speaking of the Stokers, I have had this lovely signed edition of My Heart is a Chainsaw sitting on my shelf for a long time, and I finally have picked it up, and I'm about a quarter of the way through it.
That's in my iPad TBR.
I'm not sure I've ever admitted this, but I wanted to the Only Good Indians. I wanted to like that book so bad, and it just did not work for me. I found it hard. Like the prose was beautiful, and you could step back and just see what a masterpiece it was, just how the mastery that, Stephen Graham Jones has in that, but it just didn't click for me. And this one is different. I'm really, really enjoying it. The main character is just a lot of fun, like very quirky, and it's very, very engaging. And I'm kind of doling it out a couple chapters at a time, making it last, and it's a good one. The other one, Pat jokingly asked me to name some short story writers earlier, and I blanked, despite the fact that I had this sitting right in front of me with some really great short story writers in it. So this is Orphans of Bliss. Mark Matthews edited it. He's done two more. This is addiction horror. He did Garden of Fiends, I think was the first one, and Lullabies for Suffering came out maybe 2 years ago, and it was so brilliant. He had, I think, 6 novellas in it, and they were all so fantastic. And this one has Josh Mallerman has a great story in there. Kathy Koja's in there. John F.D. Taff is absolutely somebody who I would put up there if I was forced to name somebody who really knows what they're doing with short stories. John Taff is absolutely in that tier. And Samantha Koyasnik has a really wonderful one in here. I love the anthologies he puts out, and this one was no different. Pat, how about you?
Koja's stuff is really good. I read her last short story collection, I think it was. Maybe she's had another one out since, but it really struck me as great. And of course, I don't remember the title, but yeah.
I can picture the cover, but I know I can't help you on the title, I'm afraid.
So I'm about 60% through Ellen Labott. She's a newer writer. She has this series, it's a vampire series set in Europe during World War II, but it's really a story that World War II is in the background, and there's key players from in the second one. How do I word this? There's key players to the Nazi Party in this, and it's really interesting what she does. This one's called The Sanguinarian, and I'm probably butchering this name too. I don't speak German, but Schwarzwald, and it picks up where the first one left off, and it's just this girl trying to get revenge on this pretty much an evil piece of shit vampire. And I'm having a rough time kind of elevator pitch it, but it's bloody in the parts where it should be. It covers historical aspects really well, and it flows very smoothly. There we go. Kind of nailed it, I guess. Then I'm drawing a blank on the other ones. Man, I'm sorry, Lucy. You're dealing with a mush brain today. Well, that's every night, right, Brennan?
I didn't say it.
I said it for you. So, Lucy, where can people follow you?
Beg pardon?
Wait, sorry about that. Talk quickly. I said, where can people follow you?
Let's see. I'm on Twitter. Just look for Lucy A. Snyder. I'm also on Facebook. I am on Instagram, but really badly. I don't post there very often. Same thing with Tumblr. But, if you want to interact with me, mostly it's going to be Twitter or Facebook.
Excellent. And that is SNYDER for
Yep.
those wondering. I was wondering if you have any final thoughts.
Not really. Just thanks for having me on. This was great.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a long time coming. So I appreciate your patience. And my final thoughts are thank you for giving us your time. And Brennan, off to you, sir.
Yep, echoed. Thank you for your time, and people should be on the lookout for Sister Maiden Monster out next February from Tor, unless you are an avid reviewer, and you could probably get that in like August and write up a brilliant review. Give it 4 stars or more, and actually have read.
Wait until it's actually out.
Yes, precisely.
Oh yeah, and I should have mentioned this in the beginning. Slipped my mind, but this is the 150th episode.
Woohoo!
Thanks for being a part of this, Lucy. That's pretty awesome.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Listeners, next episode is 151 with that fellow we were just talking about, Mark Matthews. He's a writer, he's an anthologist, he's a whole lot more. We'll find out all about him next episode next week. So, listeners, as always, thank you for picking us. Lucy and Brennan, thank you for being a part of this one.
Thank you very much.